late last year, I think it was around September, Panasonic teased a new camera. Me and quite a few other people thought this was going to be a G9 Mark II, and it was. And I was like, okay, let's maybe speculate some features and that kind of stuff. Now, I then have been saving up and saving up and saving up, and eventually I was able to get one. Now, the original G9 was, and I think still is, a fantastic stills camera. It's got excellent weather sealing, being freeze-proof. So obviously the Mark II of this camera had a lot to deliver on. Today we're going to talk about it and my first impressions using this camera for about 2 weeks. So the main thing is the phase detect autofocus. It's what I'm using right now, and it's what's doing a really good job in video of keeping my face still. I don't know how that's going to work with sound. I hope it works all right. For video, I always felt that the autofocus on the G9 Mark I was a little lacking. And that's fair enough. It was not a video camera. But when I was shooting pieces to camera, sometimes it would hunt a bit and it just wouldn't do a good job of tracking my face, even with face detect on. Now, the G9 Mark II has hybrid phase detect and contrast-based autofocus. We also have a few specific autofocus modes, that being human detect, which works for body and eye, animal detect, which works for body and eye as well. We have car detect, we have motorbike detect, whereas on the original G9, we had human and animal in one category and that was it. And for the most part, it did an all right job. So what's my actual real life experience like using these autofocus modes? So I've shot one Gaelic football game with the G9 Mark II, and I used the human detect autofocus for this, and it performed great. It was actually kind of shocking how well it worked. So what to me it looked like when shooting, I was using my 100-300 for this, was every player in the frame had a box around them, and I could use the joystick on the back of the camera to choose which box I wanted it to focus on. They were white when not in focus and yellow when in focus. The face and eye detect for video is what I'm using now, and then we have the animal detect. Now, I'm not lucky enough to go out on safari, but I have been out to the garden and the local river and a few places, and it's worked great. I tried a few bits of bird photography, which isn't something I really tried much with the G9. I will say if you are shooting birds in flight, it does a very good job of keeping the autofocus. And if you're curious as to what lens I've tested that out with, that would be with the 100-300 version 2, and this behemoth, which I'll make a video on at some point, the 100-400 version 1. I got that for €600 on MPB, and I think that's a great steal, considering what they normally go for on MPB. I should say, wildlife photography was never something that jumped out to me. I had done a bit of taking photos of birds in the garden, but I've never actually gone out with the express intention of taking photos of birds. But for some reason, the G9 Mark II really motivated me to do that. We do have the motorbike and car modes too. I wouldn't really be a motorsport photographer, to be completely honest. It's a bit too loud of a place for me to go. But I have tested it out on the roads and stuff, and yeah, it can track cars, it can track motorbikes. So let's talk about actual image quality upgrades. I've always said 20 megapixels is great because you can crop after the fact and not lose too much quality for printing big or for social media. This print behind me, for all it's in an A2 frame, it's an A1 print that failed, so I trimmed it to A2 size and it's in the A2 frame. And that was a pretty heavy crop as well, taken with the Lumix G9 at 20 megapixels. And if you look at it, it's fine. To me, 25 megapixels just means I can crop a little bit more, which I did do for the sports photography that I did. The high-res mode has a bit of an upgrade as well. So the original G9 would do an 80 megapixel high-res mode. The only real time I use it is if I'm taking a photo of the moon, or if I'm taking a photo of a scene and I feel like I don't have a lens long enough with me, because then I can crop in to 20 megapixels from the 80 megapixels, and then it's like I have a longer lens with me. I have tried it with the G9 Mark II, not in any landscape scenes or anything like that yet. I just haven't had the chance. I'm kind of recovering from a sore back at the moment, so I haven't been out and about as much as I'd like. And you can do all that handheld. Now, you can try and do it handheld with the original G9, and I've had some success when you're at a pretty wide focal length. On the Mark II, it's just a much better experience, and I have a much higher success rate when shooting handheld. I will say, when I'm shooting with my 100-400 or my 100-300, and I'm trying to get a handheld high-res shot of an animal in the distance, it doesn't work because, well, two reasons. The high-res mode uses your actual IBIS to shift the sensor, so your IBIS is out of the equation. And 2, animals move. So yeah, it's kind of understandable it wouldn't work. If I was on a tripod, maybe. But my back has been kind of bad, so I haven't been lugging tripods around with me. That's why this is a first impressions video and not a full review. Dynamic range-wise, I feel like I can really pull up a lot more if I have a slightly underexposed image, and I can like go a bit harder with my edits. But that was never really a complaint of mine with the G9 anyway. I thought the raw files out of this were phenomenal. We do have a Leica monochrome profile now, that's kind of cool. So I do shoot that occasionally, but rather than shooting with it, I'll just use that in editing. I'll go to the profile section in Lightroom and choose the Leica monochrome from the in-camera profiles. So, video. It's one of the reasons I chose this camera. I don't know if I'll get into exactly why I chose this camera in this video. It is just a first impressions kind of thing. The original G9 served me pretty well for doing video for the channel. Back before I was even a photography channel. If anyone's like gone through my uploads and seen why is he uploading about Rubik's Cubes? I didn't know what I was doing with my life at that point. Video-wise, it's a massive upgrade. The G9, it really was a stills camera first and then video second, which is fine, that's what it was marketed as. But if you wanted vlog, which is like, think of it as shooting a raw file, but for video, is a very oversimplified explanation. It just means you get a lot more ability to push and pull with your color grading and stuff like that. It's something I'm trying to get better at as well. You had to pay for that. You had to go and give Panasonic extra money to unlock a thing in your camera. Now, Panasonic's reasoning at the time, I think, according to some people, was this is a professional thing. And they didn't want people who really didn't need it using it and then complaining to Panasonic that their footage looked bad. The G9 II, vlog straight out of the bag. You have Cine D, you have Cine V. It's so video capable. You can plug in an external SSD and record 4K 120 frames per second. Asterisk, you need to also be supplying external power to the camera to be able to do that to the SSD. But you can also shoot at 5.3K, which is your full 4:3 sensor, whereas at the moment this is filming at 16:9. It might be 17:9, I'm not sure if I've said that right. Other video things that are important that both cameras have is a mic input and a full-size HDMI output. And it's not like on old like point-and-shoot cameras where they'd have a HDMI so you can plug into the TV and show everyone your holiday photos. They're for like plugging into an external monitor. And on both cameras we have a tilty flippy screen, so you can kind of shoot from the hip and look at the screen. I can't do that on my G9 because the screen's broken. So the autofocus is also a big upgrade for video if you're filming yourself. And I think it was Jimmy over at Red 35 who said that if you're doing like serious videography work, you're probably manually focusing. And that makes sense. But I don't really do much serious videography, and anything that I do that's not really pieces to camera is kind of just run and gun, and the autofocus is great for that. And if you're doing the whole YouTube, like, look, and then back to me. That's like, I'd film something on the G9 with it, but it would actually just take so long for it to do that. I will say, I ordered this camera in Ireland, right? I ordered it from an Irish shop in Dublin, trying to support my local camera shops, and also they had the best price available. So it's not really that local if it's in Dublin. It's the other side of the country, but you know, Ireland's a small country. But I could set it to PAL frame rates, which is what I use just because my other cameras record at those frame rates. So if I'm filming with multiple cameras, that just makes it a lot easier for me. Even though I will lose a bit if I go slow-mo. Like if you slow 60 frames per second down to 25 frames, you can stretch that more than if you shot at 50. And a final note on video, I have some notes typed out that I'm reading off, so I'm sorry if I'm glancing down a lot. I don't have a teleprompter. The original G9 did have a cage available from SmallRig, but good luck finding one. The whole time I owned a G9, I was kind of looking out for one just in case, and I couldn't find one that wasn't an absurd price on the used market. The G9 Mark II, whether you love it or hate it, has pretty much the same form factor as the S series of cameras from Panasonic. Any camera cage that fits the S5 series of cameras will fit the G9 Mark II. And that's great because on the original G9, yeah, you have your hot shoe and you can put a shotgun mic there. But what if you want a little video light? What if you want a, I don't know, something else mounted there? An external display, a handle. So you can really turn the G9 Mark II into a proper video rig. Ergonomics is something I think is super important for any camera because the best place for your camera is the hand, and if your camera is not comfortable in the hand, you're not going to want it in the hand. The original G9 is super comfortable in the hand. Like I said, it's like you've just grabbed a piece of clay and it's just molded itself perfectly into my hand. The G9ii is also comfortable. I don't know if it's necessarily more or less comfortable than the original. I think it's just that I've shot with this for so long that I know where everything is. And I'm still learning the G9 Mark II. Like I said, this is a first impressions video, not a full review. Sometimes I find that something isn't exactly where I kind of think it is. In particular is the joystick. In my video where I had hopes and predictions for the G9 Mark II, one of them was I wanted them to move the joystick on the back of the camera closer to the end. And the reason for that is I have to stretch my hand at a weird angle if I want to use the joystick. And I got used to doing that, which means now on the G9 Mark II, where the joystick is in a more comfortable position, I'm expecting it to not be there. And that's just on me. That's just because I'm moving from one camera that I know inside out to another that I have to learn. A few things is that the Mark II does not have a locking dial. If you look at my mode dial there, you can see I'm in aperture priority and I can lock that so that I can't turn that in the bag. And if you look under the mode dial on the original G9, you have a kind of like shot type setting thing. I'm not really sure what you'd call it. You can choose your burst mode or that kind of stuff. On the G9ii, that is just a separate dial on the other side of the camera. Your mode dial you can actually move with like your index finger if you stretch enough. What I do miss is this. That top LCD plate was so nice for if you're doing walkabout photography, like I call it, where you're just out with your camera, like you're on holiday and everything's super interesting and you're taking pictures left, right, and center, just to be able to take a glance down and see what your settings are, as opposed to having to look through the viewfinder. The original shutter button on the G9 Mark I is incredibly soft. It's like super sensitive. And some people like that, some people don't. I've heard it's not great if you're shooting in gloves. I just shoot in fingerless gloves. The Mark II, it's just it feels firmer. It's still not super clicky, but it's a lot firmer than on the original. And I've not really seen anyone complain about it, but I've not seen anyone praise it either. It's just something I've noticed. The G9 Mark II actually is my first ever brand new camera. I don't know if that loses me points in the person on YouTube talking about camera scene. I haven't shot any Astro with it yet, just because it's not been like super clear here. I've also not taken it on holiday yet. The original G9 has been to Germany where that photo was taken. It's been to Spain a few times. It's been to the UK. It's been all over Ireland. It never let me down until the screen just stopped working. So I decided to save up and I treated myself to a Mark II. So I want to give you I'm going to try and summarize what my first ever shooting experience with the G9 Mark II was like. First off, I went to turn it on and it took a long time to turn on. And I'm not on about like where you have to set like your region and your clock and all that kind of stuff. That was fine. I meant like I turned it off, put on a lens, turned it back on, and it took ages. It took like, never timed it, but it felt like 5 seconds, which is a long time. I'd do an awkward pause for 5 seconds, but that would ruin my engagement. So you'll have to trust me. But I did a firmware upgrade, which was just downloading the file from Panasonic's website, sticking it on the SD card, and then doing that in camera, and it was fine. One thing actually, if you're using lenses that don't have electrical contacts, this is really cool. It has like a storage bank. So I have it, so bank 1 is my 15mm f8 body cap lens, and the second one is my Helios 44-2. But I'm looking forward to using this body a lot. I'm looking forward to you guys seeing the improvement with video in this channel, he says after his light turned off. I don't know. If there's anything you want me to test with the G9 Mark II for my actual specific review of it, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. If you like any of the photos I've been showing, you can find my Instagram. I'm at Eli_Farnhill. But I had the camera like a few days and then I was out shooting a football match with it. So a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm gonna go. My back hurts a bit. All right. Cheers.